নমস্কার।
হ্যাঁ,
শুভ
স্টার্ট।
সন্ধ্যা। শুভ সন্ধ্যা। শুরু করছি একাডেমি অফ ফোকলোর আয়োজিত ধীরেন্দ্রনাথ বাস্কে স্মারক বক্তৃতামালা। আজ ধীরেন্দ্রনাথ বাস্কে স্মারক বক্তৃতামালার পঞ্চম দিন। আজ আমাদের বক্তব্যের বিষয় কাশী স্পিকার্স অফ মালানা ভিলেজ অ্যান্ড এথনো লিঙ্গুইস্টিক প্রোফাইল। বক্তা হিসাবে আমাদের সাথে উপস্থিত আছেন বিশিষ্ট ভাষাতাত্ত্বিক এবং গবেষক ডক্টর শতরূপা দত্ত মজুমদার সাহা। আমরা বক্তার কাছে তার বক্তব্য শুনে নেওয়ার আগে একটু তার সম্পর্কে সংক্ষিপ্ত জেনে নেব। শতরূপা দত্ত মজুমদার সাহা তিনি একজন লিঙ্গুইস্ট এবং তিনি তার MA এবং PhD দুটোই করেছেন লিঙ্গুইস্টিক্সের ওপরে কলকাতা বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় থেকে, এবং তিনি বিভিন্ন গবেষণার সঙ্গে তিনি যুক্ত আছেন এবং তার সাথে সাথে তিনি সেন্ট্রাল ইনস্টিটিউট অফ ইন্ডিয়ান ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ মাইসোর, ইনস্টিটিউট অফ এডুকেশন ফর ওমেন হেস্টিংস হাউস, এই বিভিন্ন জায়গায় ব্লাইন্ড বয়েজ একাডেমি, রামকৃষ্ণ মিশন, নরেন্দ্রপুর, ইন্ডিয়ান স্ট্যাটিস্টিক্যাল ইনস্টিটিউট কলকাতা, এই বিভিন্ন জায়গায় কিন্তু তিনি নানান গবেষণা করেছেন। তিনি দি এশিয়াটিক সোসাইটি কলকাতা, ইন্ডিয়ান কাউন্সিল অফ সোশ্যাল সায়েন্স রিসার্চ নিউ দিল্লি, ইনস্টিটিউট অফ সাইবার সিস্টেম অ্যান্ড ইনফরমেশন টেকনোলজি কলকাতা অ্যান্ড ইন্ডিয়ান ন্যাশনাল সায়েন্স একাডেমি নিউ দিল্লি, এই সব জায়গা থেকেই কিন্তু তার বিশিষ্ট নানান গবেষণা বিষয় কিন্তু প্রকাশিত হয়েছে। তিনি গবেষণা করেছেন এইসব নানান জায়গায়, কিন্তু তার মূল যে জায়গা, যে বিষয়ের উপর তিনি মূলত কাজ করেছেন, সেটা কিন্তু লিঙ্গুইস্টিক সিচুয়েশনস অফ দ্য স্পিচ কমিউনিটিস অফ নর্থ ইস্ট ইন্ডিয়া, স্পেশালি দ্য ইন্ডিগেড অ্যান্ড মার্জিনালাইজড কমিউনিটিস অফ দ্য রিজিয়ন। এবং তিনি বিভিন্ন ভাষাতত্ত্বের নানান রকম বিষয়ের উপরে কাজ করেছেন, যেমন অসমিয়া, বাংলা, কাশি, কোচ, লেপচা, উড়িয়া, তিওয়া ইত্যাদি নানান বিষয়ের উপরে তার কিন্তু প্রচুর কন্ট্রিবিউশন আছে আর কি নানান জায়গায়। এবং সেই জায়গা থেকেই আজকে আমরা শুনে নেব তার যে বিভিন্ন ভাষাতাত্ত্বিক যে জায়গা, সেই জায়গা থেকে আজকে আমাদের যে বক্তব্যের বিষয় সেটা কিন্তু কাশী স্পিকার্স অফ মালানা ভিলেজ অ্যান্ড এথনো লিঙ্গুইস্টিক প্রোফাইল। আমরা ডেকে নেব বিশিষ্ট ভাষাতাত্ত্বিক এবং গবেষক ডক্টর শতরূপা দত্ত মজুমদার সাহাকে। আপনাকে স্বাগত একাডেমি অফ ফোকলোরের ধীরেন্দ্রনাথ বাস্কে স্মারক বক্তৃতামালায়।
অনেক ধন্যবাদ দেবতুষী। নমস্কার ও শুভ সন্ধ্যা। একাডেমি অফ ফোকলোরের সমস্ত সদস্যকে ও সব শ্রোতা বন্ধুদের নমস্কার ও কৃতজ্ঞতা জানাই। আমাকে এই ধীরেন্দ্রনাথ বাস্কে স্মারক বক্তৃতামালায় আহ্বান করার জন্য প্রফেসর চন্দ্রমল্লী সেনগুপ্ত ও প্রফেসর মাধুরী সরকারকে বিশেষ কৃতজ্ঞতা জানাচ্ছি। প্রফেসর ধীরেন্দ্রনাথ বাস্কে মহাশয়কে আমার সশ্রদ্ধ প্রণাম জানিয়ে আমি আমার আজকের বক্তব্য শুরু করছি। আমি আজ এমন একটি আদিবাসী জনগোষ্ঠী সম্পর্কে বলবো যে জনগোষ্ঠী সম্পর্কে আমরা এখনো পর্যন্ত খুবই কম জানতে পেরেছি। ফলে এই জনগোষ্ঠীর অবস্থান ও তাদের ভাষার গুরুত্ব একটি আন্তর্জাতিক বিষয়। এই বিষয়টি মাথায় রেখেই আমি আমার আজকের বক্তব্য ইংরেজিতেই বলার কথা ভেবেছি, যাতে বাংলা ভাষাভাষী মানুষ ছাড়াও অন্য মানুষ এই কুলু উপত্যকার মালানা গ্রামের কানাসি ভাষা গোষ্ঠীর বা জনগোষ্ঠীর কথা জানতে পারেন। The language spoken in the Malana village of Kullu district of Himachal Pradesh is widely known by the name Kanashi. Malani is the alternative name of the language. According to just a minute, আমি একটু স্লাইডটা শেয়ার করে নিই। আমার স্লাইড দেখতে পাওয়া যাচ্ছে কি? হ্যালো?
হ্যাঁ,
হ্যালো?
দেখতে পাওয়া যাচ্ছে দিদি, দেখতে পাওয়া
আচ্ছা,
যাচ্ছে।
ওকে, থ্যাংক ইউ। So the language spoken in the Malana village of Kullu district of Himachal Pradesh is widely known by the name Kanashi. Malani is the alternative name of the language. According to ethnologue, the speaker strength of Kanashi is 1400. The number of speakers is 1500 according to UNESCO report. At the onset of the discussion on the language and the speech community, it is necessary to mention that the members of the speech community residing in Malana village do not recognize the term Kanashi as the name of their mother tongue. Rather, they deny the term Kanashi for their mother tongue. Being asked about the nomenclature of the language they speak, they return it as Apna Bhasa, simply meaning one's own language, or at the most Malana Bhasa. The speakers prefer to call their language Malani. Probably the term Kanashi is an exonym which is being used by the neighboring communities. According to the scholars, genealogically, Kanashi is identified as a Tibeto-Burman language of Sino-Tibetan language family. The language has been classified as a Kinauri language belonging to West Himalayish group of Tibeto-Kanauri branch of Tibeto-Burman group. It is said to be related to Milchang, a sub-branch of Kinauri group of languages. The Kanashi language is an admixture of Sanskrit and Tibetan varieties, has been stated by scholars like Bangru and Stronsky 2002, although this is a controversial statement. The language is lesser known and has no written form. The language has been reported to have no intelligibility with the neighboring languages spoken in Lahul Spiti and Kinnor. The source of this information is my Kanashi informant during my field investigation. Kanashi has been referred by UNESCO as definitely endangered. Now, this is the picture which is in the slide. It is a picture of the Malana village, and where the speakers are called Kanashi speakers by the outside people. So, this is a picture of the village. The data of the present discussion is based on my field investigation undertaken during 2013 and 14 in the Malana village of Kullu district. Malana Valley is connected by Rasol, a mountain pass, via Nagar, Parvati Valley, and Chandrakhoni Pass. The valley can be reached from Jari, which is 2 hours drive from Kullu, crossing the Malana powerhouse. Approximately, it requires 3 to 4 hours trek to reach Malana via the dam over Parboti River. The height of the Malana village is approximately 10,000 feet above the sea level. Now, coming to the existing views of the history of the people of Malana. The existing views on the history of the land and the people of the Malana village vary. Some are of opinion that the people of Malana are the descendants of a group of Greek soldiers who came to India during the invasion of Alexander and made permanent settlements in this area, therefore Western in origin. The villagers claim that they are the descendants of Rakshasa. Here we enter into the myth of the villagers. The myth of the villages center round the story of the advent of the reputed Indian saint or rishi Jamodagni, referred in Mahabharata as an Aryan saint who had to fight against the Rakshasa, referred as non-Aryan group of people indigenous to the land, in order to gain control over the land, which is Malana. Due to his deep prayer and worship to Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshwara, the Indo-Aryan gods, Rishi Jamadagni received a boon from Shiva. Being asked for a place with natural resources, Shiva instructed Jamadagni Rishi to go to Malana. At that time, Malana was under the rule of Rakshasa, probably the original inhabitants of the place. Having been reached there, Jamadagni had to encounter the conflict with the Rakshasa. This resulted into a struggle between the Rishi and the Rakshasa, who are also called Banashura. It is a popular story that initially Jamadagni had to suffer in a pan of boiling oil and water, of course, for long 12 years. But as he was a saintly person, he was able to survive. But when the turn of the Rakshasa came for boiling in a pan of hot oil, the Rakshasa realized that he will be destroyed completely and begged pardon to the Rishi. Jamadagni dictated him to leave Malana forever if he wants to survive. But the Rakshasa bargained his terms, and the conflict between Rishi and Rakshasa came to an halt with some mutual understanding. The terms which Rakshasa gave are significant to the people of Malana. Now, what are those terms? And these terms we find it is still maintained in the Malana village. Now, what were those terms? The first one was the Kanashi, or the language of Malana, should be maintained by the inhabitants of the Malana village. Secondly, the customs and traditions followed in the social functions like marriage and death ritual should be maintained. For example, marriage during night and feeding particular number of village people after the demise of a villager. This is to be done by the family members of the deceased person. Thirdly, there should be two houses or groups of people to look after administration and judiciary separately. These two people will be elected by the people of Malana in consensus. It is still maintained in the village, and many scholars have referred this two-tier system, the lower house and upper house of the Malana village, as oldest democracy of the world. Fourthly, Rakshasa or Banashura should be consulted while selecting the executive body. Fifthly, but for the matter of justice, the authority will be of Jamadagni Rishi. And the last point was the last term, Rakshasa has to be offered food and drink on a regular basis at least once in a day at Jot. Jot is a place on the other side of the Parvati valley opposite to the Malana village where Rakshasa will reside forever. This is still maintained today. Jamadagni agreed to these conditions of Rakshasa and made the Rakshasa leave the Malana village forever. But even today, the tradition of offering the first sacrifice to Rakshasa during festival is followed, but Jamadagni Rishi is worshipped as the god in the village. Now, this is the picture which I am showing in the slide. It is the picture of the temple one and the only temple where Jamadagni Rishi is being worshipped. And as I was an outsider to the village people, so I was not allowed to enter the village because they are very strict about the maintenance of this kind of integrity amongst the villagers only, and they do not allow the outsiders to enter into their temple, or even they do not allow the outsiders to enter the lower house or upper house where they actually conglomerate to discuss and decide over the matters regarding the village administration and judiciary. Now, all this is made up of wood. You can see very well see from the picture. Now, an interpretation. Now, this is the myth. Now, how do we interpret the myth regarding the language or the linguistic situation of the Malana village? Language, being the set of arbitrary vocal symbols meant for communication shared by an aggregate of people, does not change all of a sudden. Language change, language shift, or language death occurs in due course of time due to superstrate and substrate languages in the ever-changing socio-political situations. The myth which tells about the maintenance of the language of the ruling Rakshasa even after they left the Malana village seems to be significant in the issue of maintaining the Tibeto-Burman language which the Kanashi people speak at present. It is a language which carries within its structure the traces of languages in contact. In every probability, the ruling group, which is referred to as Rakshasa, was a speaker of a Tibeto-Burman language. Being the dominant language of the ruling class, the Tibeto-Burman language was very naturally adopted by the people of Malana village. Here it is pertinent to mention that so far as the physical feature is concerned, resemblance with the Indo-European group of people is observed among the Kanashi speakers of the Malana village. By any means, their physical features do not resemble with the Tibeto-Burman people as we find in the northeastern part of India. Although after much struggle, Jamadagni Rishi, who is known to be an Aryan saint, could throw away the ruling Rakshasa, the Indo-Aryan language variety could not be restored or introduced among the people of the Malana village. Thus, a Tibeto-Burman variety of language is still found to be maintained in the Malana village. Now here I show some pictures. These are the close pictures of their wooden construction of the temple. These are the carvings, engravings, and this is also the picture. I think everybody can see these pictures. And this is the head of the lamb. They actually sacrifice lambs in different festivals, and this is their ritual, and they put it like this in front of the temple. This is the door of the temple of Rishi Jamadagni. Now this is the temple. Now coming to the linguistic profile of the Kanashi language. As Kanashi is a language which has no written form, the use of the language is restricted to the home and in the village domains. The language of Malana has no place in the educational domain. Education is imparted to the children of Malana village through Hindi. The religious practice is, of course, done in the Malana language. The religious practice is handed over by the Malana priests orally to their disciples, and this system continues for generations. The language of the religious teachings is considered to be a restricted variety of the language by the members of the speech community. As the language has no written form, the question of literary activity does not arise. The folk tales and folk songs are there, but these folklores cannot be heard any time of the year. It is only in the winter months, when snow falls in the village, when people are unable to carry out regular activities of livelihood, these folk tales are communicated by the older generation to the younger members of the speech community. In this way, folk tales are handed over to the next generation. Folk songs can be heard only during festivals like Phagri, held in the month of February every year. Field investigation reveals that there is a belief system among the Malana village people that if they tell the folk tales during other seasons, that is, other than winter, then the snowfall will start early that year. So they avoid this traditional storytelling very cautiously during rest of the year. Folk songs are sung during the festivals in chorus and are continued by relay. Coming to the use of language in administration, judiciary, industry, and media. The language is used in the village level administration and in the judiciary. They have their own customary law. The people of Malana have their own system of weaving cloth at the domestic level. Warm clothes are woven from the wool of the sheep for their own use. These are usually not sold in the market. Shoes are traditionally made from the fiber of the hashish plant, which are sold in the outside market of Kullu these days. Therefore, as far as their industry is concerned, they use their own language along with Kulvi and Hindi. Impact of Hindi through audiovisual media is evident among the people of the Malana village. Barring a few people of very old generation, most of the people have proficiency in listening and speaking Hindi. Now, coming to orthography, Kanashi has no written form till date, I have already mentioned. So, a study of the primary status of the speech sounds was carried out by the present speaker with the initiative of Bombom Charitable Trust and NGO for grammatical study of the Kanashi language. Depending upon the study of the speech sounds, an orthographic system has been proposed where a modified set of Roman alphabets has been used for representing the Kanashi speech sounds. This is hoped to yield further development of the language by means of codification of norms of the language and elaboration of the language in respect to its use in different social domains. Coming to the intelligibility of the language, the Kanashi language is not intelligible among the neighboring communities of Lahul and Spiti area. Due to commercial reason, the people of Malana village have the communicative ability in Kulvi, the language of the Kullu district, and also in Hindi. Though the people of Malana are found to be proficient in Kulvi, which is an Indo-Aryan language, Kanashi or the language of Malana is not intelligible to the Kullu speech community. The Malana people prefers to keep their Apna Bhasa or their own language restricted to the domain of their own community. Now, what are the efforts for promoting the language? I have already mentioned the name of Bom Bom Charitable Trust, a non-government organization that has taken the initiative for the development of the language and preservation of the culture of this speech community. The name of the filmmaker, Sri Omlan Dotto, is worth mentioning in this regard. A documentary film entitled Bomb One Day Ahead of Democracy has been produced by him, where the traditional system of democracy consisting of two houses, that is upper house and lower house of the Malana village administration, has been documented. Further effort like proposing script of the language, which I have already mentioned, and preparing of Kanashi grammar and dictionary are ongoing works by the present speaker. Now, coming to the question of linguistic vitality, when we think of ethnolinguistics, we necessarily we are we need to think about the ethnolinguistic vitality of a speech community. As already mentioned, Kanashi language has been referred by UNESCO as definitely endangered. Language shrinkage and language loss, especially for a language which has no written form, is extremely alarming. When the members of the speech community are found to communicate in the languages other than their mother tongue in different domains of social life, shrinkage of their own language takes place, which makes the language endangered, as chances of language loss or language death becomes imminent. Language shrinkage or language loss results from the practice of constant language shift due to the pressure of dominant or neighboring languages. The reason of such language loss are varied. These can be socio-cultural, socio-economic, socio-political, so on and so forth. An attempt to draw a sociolinguistic profile of a community which has no written form and which has already been declared endangered makes the study of ethnolinguistic vitality imperative. The factors to determine the ethnolinguistic vitality of a speech community proposed by UNESCO has been taken into consideration in the present study for examining the vitality status of the Kanashi speech community. So the first factor is population and population distribution and group dynamics. As mentioned earlier, Malana Valley is situated at a height of approximately 10,000 feet above the sea level, connected by Mountain Pass, Parvati Valley, and Chandrakhoni Pass. Access to the Malana village is really difficult as the village is not connected by roadways. Therefore, marginal access to the urban center for the people of Malana can be considered as one of the factors favorable for maintenance of their mother tongue. Now, coming to the socio-economic and socio-political base of the speech community. The socio-economic base of the people of Malana village can be said to be the cultivation of marijuana. The best quality hashish are produced in this village, which is widely known as Malana cream in the commercial sphere. These plants are grown very naturally in this valley. Here in the picture, you can see, though it's not very clear, it's a bit hazy, the hashish plants in the back of the tree. There are so many of these plants are abundantly grown in this valley. So these plants are grown very naturally in this valley. But due to the present narcotic law of the country, there is no legal status of this economic sustainability. As regards agriculture, some cereals known as pittas are cultivated in a nearby place of higher altitude. This is a staple food of the people of Malana village. Pasturing is integral to the livelihood of the people of this village. Weaving of woolens from sheep wool are the age-old domestic practices, though this does not form the economic base of the community. Lack of opportunity of education has barred these people to earn their livelihood from different other occupations. As the major socio-economic base of the community is confined to the valley, the situation is congenial for the maintenance of their mother tongue. Exposure to the urban center for the purpose of livelihood in Kullu has made them proficient in Kulvi. The impact of the Hindi language is a recent development. For the Malana people, Hindi is preferred for broader socio-political and cultural interactions. Now, coming to social domains in which the language is used. The community of the Malana village has a two-tier system for legislation and judiciary. I have already mentioned about that, the upper house and the lower house. These are elected bodies. The administrative control of the village resides in these houses. The Kanashi language is used for all purposes of village administration, legislation, and judiciary. There is formal education system established by the government where Hindi is the medium of instruction there and Kulvi is also taught. But as the Kanashi language has no written form, there is no place of the language in the educational domain. Shifts in the domains of language use. The use of Kanashi in different domains of social life reveals that the language is frequently used by all the speakers informally in the village or home domain. Particularly, the older generation has no other language except Kanashi in their speech repertoire. Shift to Hindi is evident in case of interaction with the outsiders, especially in the formal domain. Shift to Kulvi is evident for commercial purpose. In the traditional religious domain, Kanashi is used exclusively. Now, coming to the status of the dominant neighboring languages. The neighboring languages like Spiti or Lahuli has no impact on the speech community. Kulvi, the local official language of the Kullu district, has a considerable dominant position in the Malana village. The status of Hindi language is quite high among the Kanashi speakers. First of all, this is due to the official status of the language as lingua franca of the country, and secondly, or more importantly, Hindi is the language of mass media and entertainment. The impact of Hindi, being a pan-Indian feature, has also penetrated in this remote village of Himachal Pradesh. Significantly enough, the Kanashi speakers do not feel the need for recognizing the English language. Coming to the point of intergenerational language transmission, that is, handing over the norms and rules of language or mother tongue use to the future generation, is considered integral for the survival of a language. The use of Kanashi, the mother tongue, in different domains of social life revealed the picture that the language is used frequently by all the speakers. As there is no instance of inter-ethnic marriage with the neighboring speech communities, no crisis is evident in the transmission of the mother tongue to the future generation. Now, coming to frequency and type of code switching and code mixing. Code mixing and code switching in Kulvi is a regular feature of the conversation of the Kanashi speakers. As regards code mixing, the influence of the Hindi language is evident in the vocabulary level. It is alarming to note that most of the Kanashi speakers, especially those who belong to the younger generation, are not aware of the presence of Hindi vocabulary or Hindi words in their conversation. Some people of older generation, of course, are conscious of the presence of the Hindi words in their language or conversation. It has been observed that the frequency of interference of the Hindi language is on the rise. Now, the eighth point, the community members' attitude towards their own language. The members of the Kanashi speech community are not conscious about the maintenance or preservation of their language. Probably this is due to lack of interaction with the urban setup and the relative confinement of the community in such a remote valley. The members of the speech community neither feel the necessity nor do they show any initiative regarding the codification of their mother tongue. The Kanashi speakers do not register any chance of language interference, shift, or loss. Observation during my field investigation reveals that these people believe in the natural continuous flow of the existence of their mother tongue. This belief is supported to some extent by the myth of Rakshasa and Jamadagni that centers round the story of the retention of their language, which I have already mentioned earlier. The idea of the probability of the loss of their language is not even agreed by the Kanashi speakers. Now, the social outlook of the neighboring communities regarding the speech community. The attitude towards one's mother tongue is not always dependent upon the collective perception of the speech community, but to some extent it is also conditioned by the perception of the members, or in other words, on the attitude of the other neighboring speech communities. Scholars like Landwehr 2008 proposes or views how well a group is perceived by the outsiders and whether or not it is supported by outsiders, for example, by government funding for developmental projects, also has an impact on the value associated with the group's language. The linguistic identity of a speech community is manifested in the choice and use of the mother tongue by the speech community in different domains of social life. It is the integrative motive, the perception of the community regarding their own language and culture, which finds its reflection in the maintenance of their mother tongue. Thus, this indicator of ethnolinguistic vitality is a measure of the language community's social outlook both internally and externally. Greater the positive internal identity, external status, and cultural distinctions, the better is the support of the vernacular language. At the non-governmental levels, institutional and individual efforts for the development of the language and documentation of the culture show evidence in support of Kanashi, which I have also discussed earlier. Support is yet to be had from the government level for the linguistic development of the speech community. Coming to institutional policies and attitude of the government towards the language. The need for documentation of Kanashi as an endangered language has captured the attention of the government institution like CIIL Mysore, but nothing can be attested in favor of such attention till date. Bombam Charitable Trust, a non-government organization operating in Kolkata, Delhi and Kullu, has taken some initiative and ongoing effort, which I have already mentioned, for codification and documentation of the language. Now, coming to the point which discusses the type and quality of documentation of the language and the community. Documentation of the Kanashi language by introducing Roman script is a very recent ongoing effort for codification of the language. There is absolutely no documentation of the language till date. Some sketchy description of some of the linguistic structure is available in some stray articles. Therefore, documentation of the language is a need of the hour. Now, regarding availability of materials for language education and literacy, as already discussed, the language is not codified. So, no material has been produced in the Kanashi language for education and literacy. Codification of language is a prerequisite for literacy in mother tongue. Now, coming to some concluding remarks to sum up the whole discussion here. The brief sketch of the ethnolinguistic profile of Kanashi divulges the fact that there is practically no systematic documentation of this speech community. Leaving aside the aspect of language codification and aspects of elaboration of the language, no objective investigation has ever been carried out regarding the speech community. Field investigation reveals that we even do not have a proper anthropological description of the community. An account of the social structure and cultural description of the speech community of the Malana village is yet to be attempted. Therefore, for the development of this community, a detailed investigation of the language, society, and culture is a desideratum. Now here are a few pictures. This is a traditional house of the Malana village, which the photograph is taken by myself. And this is a closer picture of the building of such houses where they meet. And this is the textile of the Kanashi or the Malana people, which they weave themselves. It is a domestic affair for them, and this is made up of the wool from the sheep wool. Now, coming to the acknowledgement part, I am extremely thankful and grateful to late Professor Ashok Kumar Datto of Indian Statistical Institute, Kolkata, and Sri Omlan Datto of Bombam Charitable Trust for initiating me in the present study and helping me to collect the data by visiting the Malana village. I am also grateful to Shanta, a Kanashi speaker of the village, who was primarily my Kanashi informant. I am grateful to my teacher, Professor Krishna Bhattacharya, for her invaluable suggestion all throughout. So thank you for your patient listening, and namaskar to all of you. This is the picture of the Malana village during my field investigation. So thank you once again, and namaskar to all of you.
থ্যাংক ইউ শতরূপা দত্ত মজুমদার সাহা ম্যাডাম। আপনার বক্তব্য অসাধারণ লাগলো, এবং সবচেয়ে বড় কথা যে স্লাইড শো এর মাধ্যমে বক্তব্যটিতে যেন আরো একটু বেশি আকর্ষণীয় হয়ে উঠেছে, এবং যেভাবে ওই কানাশি এই মানুষদের, তাদের ভাষা, তাদের গান, তাদের লোকসংস্কৃতি নিয়ে আপনি আলোচনা করলেন, আপনাকে অসংখ্য ধন্যবাদ। এবং আশা করব আমাদের একাডেমি অফ ফোকলোরের মঞ্চে আবারও আপনাকে পাবো। আজকে এই পর্যন্তই। আমাদের উপস্থিত সব শ্রোতাদের ধন্যবাদ জানিয়ে, শুভরাত্রি জানিয়ে আজ এখানেই শেষ করছি। নমস্কার।
নমস্কার।